Imagine for a second that you're walking down a quiet street. It's a nice day, and suddenly you see someone pick up a brick and just hurl it right through a storefront window.
Hmm.
Glass shatters everywhere. It's loud, it's violent, it's a total mess. Now, usually when we look at that scenario, our brains, they immediately divide the world into two very distinct roles.
Right.
You have the person throwing the brick, the doer, the perpetrator, and then you have the person who owns the shop, the receiver, the victim.
That is the traditional, totally intuitive way we see cause and effect. Two different people.
Yeah.
Two totally different experiences. One is acting, the other is being acted upon. Simple.
Exactly. But what if I told you that actually the person throwing the brick and the person sweeping up the glass are the same person?
Okay.
And I don't mean in some, psychological Fight Club split personality kind of way. I mean, what if the structure of reality itself is set up so that the one who causes the problem is inevitably, mathematically, the one who suffers from it?
And that is the provocative premise we are unpacking today. We're taking a very serious look at this piece of analysis called the closed circle, systemic logic and the end of extraction. And it argues exactly that.
That we're basically throwing the brick and hitting ourselves in the head with it.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
That we're moving from a world where actions seem to have no immediate consequences, where you could throw the brick and run away before the cops came, to a world where the bill is coming due instantly. The feedback is immediate.
And I think we need to be really clear right up front for everyone listening, because I know how this can sound. This isn't a conversation about karma.
No.
We aren't talking about what goes around comes around in a spiritual sense, or some kind of cosmic punishment, or nature taking revenge on humanity because we've been naughty.
Not at all. This is a deep dive into physics. It's about mechanics. It's about engineering, systems theory. The central thesis here is based on what the source calls systemic logic.
Systemic logic.
Yeah. And it posits that in any closed system with feedback loops, which, let's be clear, Earth definitively is, the doer, the one acting, and the receiver, the one feeling the impact, are ultimately one and the same entity.
It's just that usually we don't see it that way because of the time delay. That's the key, right? The lag. And we are going to spend a lot of time on that. But the source makes this incredibly heavy point that humanity is currently closing the largest feedback loop in history.
We absolutely are. And the tone of this deep dive is, I think, really important to set. We are not here to moralize. We're not here to say humanity is evil for using fossil fuels or cutting down trees or building cities. That's not the point.
Right. It's not a moral play.
It's not a moral theater. We're looking at this through the lens of a ledger. It's accounting. It's not about who is bad. It's about what is mathematically inevitable when you run a system the way we've run ours for the last, 2 centuries.
I love that framing. No moral theater, just mechanics. So, here's the mission for this deep dive. We've got a lot to cover. We're going to explore how we got here, this massive phase of what the source calls extraction.
Right.
We're going to look at why we didn't notice the problem sooner, a concept the source calls the grace period, which I found fascinating. And then we're going to talk about what happens when that buffer, that grace period, runs out.
Which it calls the compression event.
The compression event, exactly. And by the end of this, the goal is that you, the listener, will understand why the headlines feel so chaotic right now, why it feels like everything is happening all at once. And more importantly, we want to help shift your mindset from feeling like a helpless victim of all these changes to becoming what the source calls an adapter.
And that's the key shift right there. Moving from, why is this happening to me, to, okay, this is happening, so how do I navigate this closing circle? It's a fundamental change in perspective.
So let's start with the machinery. The source talks about the torus of cause and effect. Can we just break down what a feedback loop actually is? Because I think we use that term a lot, in business or tech, but we don't really apply it to reality enough.
Sure. A feedback loop, in its simplest definition, is a mechanism where an output of a system circles back and becomes an input again. It's information returning to the source of the action.
Okay.
And the source material distinguishes between two really important types of loops to help us understand our current predicament: simple loops and complex loops.
And simple loops are the ones we deal with every day, right? The stuff our brains are actually evolved to handle.
Exactly. These exist on an individual scale. The classic primal example is touching a hot stove.
Yep, done that.
We all have. You touch it, and the pain is immediate. It's not ambiguous. It's not delayed. It is right now.
Ouch. Lesson learned, don't do that again.
Exactly. The feedback is fast. And because that feedback is immediate, the learning happens instantly. Your behavior adjusts. You don't keep touching the stove.
Right, you don't need a committee meeting about it.
You don't need a peer-reviewed study to tell you the stove is hot. You don't need a government regulation banning stove touching. The pain itself is the information. It tells you everything you need to know.
Or something like hunger, right? If I skip lunch, I'm grumpy and useless by 3 p.m. The feedback is pretty direct.
Perfect example. Don't eat, and hunger arrives in hours. Don't sleep, fatigue arrives the next day. In all these simple scenarios, the doer, you touching the stove, and the receiver, you feeling the pain, they feel like the same entity.
Because they are.
They are. And the time gap is so small, there's no room for confusion. There's zero ambiguity. I did this, and now I feel this.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I touched the stove, I burned my finger, I am both the person who touched it and the person who got burned. It's contained. But the problem arises with the complex loops. This is where we get into real trouble as a species.
This is where it all goes sideways. Correct. Complex loops operate on a collective scale, not individual, and crucially, over much, much longer time frames. And this is where things get so tricky for the human brain.
Okay, so let's use the big one.
Let's take the big one. Burning fossil fuels. You burn coal or gas today. You get the energy benefit immediately. The lights turn on, the car moves, the factory produces goods. The reward is now.
The benefit is right now, this second. I flip a switch, I get light.
But the consequence, the accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere, the trapping of heat, the gradual destabilization of the entire climate system, that doesn't happen that afternoon.
No.
It accumulates silently, invisibly. And the real noticeable impact arrives decades later, maybe even a century later.
Or another one from the source-depleting aquifers. We pump water out of the ground today to, say, grow almonds in a desert. We get the almonds, we get the profit this year.
Right. Good quarter for the almond growers.
But the water crisis, the collapsing ground, that might not happen for a generation or two.
Exactly. And in these complex loops, the feedback is slow. It's diffuse. And because it's slow, our learning is delayed. Or it doesn't happen at all. Our behavior continues unchanged because we aren't getting that immediate ouch signal like we do with the stove.
We get all the benefit now, and the cost is pushed into this nebulous future that doesn't feel real.
It feels like someone else's problem.
Which brings us to what the source calls the illusion of separation. I found this absolutely fascinating. It's essentially a trick of the mind, isn't it? A cognitive glitch.
It is. It's a profound perceptual mismatch. The source actually calls it the temporal blindness problem.
Temporal blindness.
Yeah. See, we humans, we perceive time based on our own lifespans. We see our, 70, 80, maybe 90 years as real time. That's our window of relevance. That's what matters to us.
But the planet doesn't work that way.
Not at all. Systems, geological systems, ecological systems, climate systems, they operate on decadal or century or even millennial cycles. They have a totally different clock speed.
So because the feedback arrives so slowly, the person who plants the extractive system, let's say an industrialist in the 1950s, in the middle of the post-war boom, and the person who has to face the collapse from that system, us or our kids, living with the consequences, they feel like completely different entities.
Exactly. We see them as separate. Our narrative is, they did this. We are suffering. It creates this clean break. Villain and victim.
But the source argues that this is it's an illusion, a function of our limited perception, that the doer is the receiver. They're just separated by time.
Yes. We are all connected through the collective body of humanity. The person who planted the system and the person experiencing its end are part of the same organism, just at different points in its life cycle.
Wow, that's a heavy concept to sit with. It basically says there is no such thing as getting away with it.
None.
It just means the bill hasn't arrived in the mail yet.
Precisely. Physics doesn't allow for unpaid debts. The circle always completes. It's just a matter of when.
So, okay, let's look at the bill. If the circle is closing, we need to know what we bought, what we put on that credit card. The source has a section called the Inventory of Extraction. And honestly, reading through this list, it's staggering. We have been very, very busy for the last 200 years.
We have. Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, we have been systematically extracting from Earth systems at rates that are just. They're exponential. And it's not just oil. That's what people think of first, but it's everything.
So let's run through it in detail because the scale is the whole point. Energy is the big one, obviously.
Right. We took fossil fuels. Now, let's stop and think about what fossil fuels actually are. They are quite literally millions of years of ancient sunlight.
Right. It's not just black goo. It's stored time.
It's time and energy. Photosynthesis from the Carboniferous period, captured by plants, buried, compressed, and stored in a dense, stable geological battery underground. We found a battery that was charged by, say, 50 million years of continuous sunlight.
And we figured out how to drain it.
We drained it in a geological nanosecond. In about 150 years, we've burned through a significant chunk of it. That is a massive, massive release of energy that was safely sequestered deep underground. But it's not just carbon. We also moved nuclear materials.
How does that fit in?
Well, we took uranium from stable underground deposits where it was harmless, refined it, and brought it to the unstable surface. We took potential energy and made it kinetic, and in some cases, wildly dangerous.
Okay, then there's food and water. I think people understand that we farm, obviously, but the source talks about topsoil as something we've extracted. I usually think of mining for, gold or coal, not soil.
But we absolutely do mine it. Topsoil takes millennia to form. It's not just dirt. It's a complex living ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, worms, organic matter. It takes nature, on average, about 500 years to build one single inch of fertile topsoil.
500 years for an inch.
And we have lost massive amounts of it globally in just decades due to industrial agriculture practices. Deep plowing, chemical saturation, leaving fields bare, monocropping. We treated soil like an inert mineral deposit to be used up, not a living system to be nurtured.
And the same logic applies to the oceans.
Absolutely. We've decimated fish populations.
Yeah.
Not just fishing, but trawling, which is like bulldozing the ocean floor. And aquifers, we are draining ancient water reserves that have been there since the last ice age.
Fossil water.
That's what it is. Fossil water, water that was deposited tens of thousands of years ago. We are pumping it out to grow thirsty crops in places that shouldn't be farming them, and we're doing it hundreds of times faster than the rain can ever hope to recharge it. It's a one-time withdrawal.
And then there's space, which sounds abstract, but it's not. We've cleared forests, we've drained wetlands, we've hardened coastal zones with concrete, we've simplified biodiversity on a colossal scale. We took complex, wild, resilient space and turned it into simple, brittle, human space.
And perhaps the most abstract, but I think the most frightening one on the list. We extracted time.
Yeah, explain that one. That's the one that really gets me. How do you extract time?
You borrow against future carrying capacity. By consuming resources now that future generations would absolutely need, like that fossil water or that topsoil,
Right.
or by filling up the waste sinks, like the atmosphere or the oceans that future generations would need to use, we literally shortened the timeline of our civilization's stability.
Yeah.
We used the future's margin of safety to fuel the present. We ate our children's dinner.
Okay, so here is the mystery for me. And the source poses this question beautifully. If we were doing all this damage, burning the stored sunlight, draining the ancient water, stripping the living soil for 200 years, why didn't everything collapse sooner?
Yes.
Why did it feel for so long like we were getting away with it? I mean, for the vast majority of the 20th century, for my grandparents, things seemed to be getting better, not worse. Life expectancy went up, wealth went up. Where was the feedback?
That is the crucial question. It's the central mystery of the last 2 centuries. And the answer lies in what the source calls the grace period.
The grace period.
The Earth's systems are not fragile. They are not like a delicate wine glass. They are remarkably resilient. They have what scientists call buffering capacity. They can absorb shock. They can take a punch. They can take a lot of punches.
As this system was it was taking the hit for us.
Exactly. It was acting as a massive planetary buffer. Think about the atmosphere. We pumped CO2 into it for a century and a half, and for a long time, the climate didn't go completely haywire. Why?
I assume because the planet is huge.
It is, but more specifically, the oceans were absorbing a huge amount of that heat and a significant portion of the carbon. The oceans acted as a giant heat sink, hiding the true extent of the warming from us on the surface.
So it was soaking up the problem.
It was soaking it up. And the biosphere, the trees, the soil, it was revving up its metabolism to take in more CO2. The planet was actively working to maintain equilibrium.
And the soil itself, you mentioned.
Right. The soil in, say, the American Midwest remained incredibly productive despite abusive farming practices because it had these deep, deep reserves of organic matter built up over thousands of years of prairie grasses. It could buffer the chemical inputs and the physical degradation, but only up to a point.
So this aha moment in the text really hit me. This resilience, this amazing ability of the Earth to take a beating and keep functioning, that was the grace period.
Yes. And here is the absolute tragedy of the story. We mistook that buffering capacity for permission.
Wow. Say that again.
We mistook the system's strengths, its buffering, for a green light. We thought that because we weren't seeing immediate catastrophic consequences, there were no consequences. We thought the lack of feedback meant the system approved of what we were doing, that it was free.
It's like
Oh,
you have a credit card with a really, really high limit,
yeah.
and you just keep spending and spending, and the card never gets declined. So you assume, hey, I must be rich. This money is free.
That is a perfect analogy. We were eating through the planet's credit line, its buffering capacity. And the terrifying thing about buffers is that they work perfectly until the exact moment they stop working.
There's no gradual warning.
Very little. They mask the underlying problem until the problem becomes acute, maybe even unsolvable. The system appears fine, and then it's broken.
Which brings us to the bathtub.
Mm.
This analogy in the source is so simple but so powerful.
The bathtub analogy. It explains our current situation perfectly. Imagine a bathtub. You can pour water into it. That's the inflow. That's our pollution, our extraction, our CO2.
Okay.
As long as the bathtub isn't full, it absorbs the water. The level rises, but nothing spills onto the floor. The system contains the input. It's buffering.
Well, once it's full,
Once it is full, once the volume is reached, the mechanics of the system change instantly. At that point, every single drop you put in equals a drop spilling out on the floor. Every single one. The system shifts from absorption to rejection.
and the argument here, the core of this whole thing, is that Earth systems, the atmosphere, the oceans, the soil, the ice sheets, were operating with excess capacity for those 200 years. They are the half-empty bathtub. But
Yeah.
now,
Now we are at the rim. The water tension is bulging over the edge. In many systems, we're already spilling over. We have moved from a phase where the planet dampened our impacts to a phase where the planet now amplifies them.
and this is where we get to the reversal. The source uses this chilling phrase. The symmetry is precise. This part of the text, it lists what we took and what is now being taken from us. And it's like a perfect, terrifying mirror image.
It is a terrifying symmetry. It's the ledger balancing in real time. It's not metaphorical, it's literal. We should walk through the exchanges carefully because this is the circle closing.
Okay, let's do it. So first, we consumed stored energy, all those fossil fuels. We burned them to create ease, comfort, motion, and complexity.
And now, climate stability is extracted from us. Think about that exchange. We use that cheap stored energy to build comfort and predictability. Now, we have to use massive amounts of expensive real-time energy just to cope with the chaos.
Like what?
Like running air conditioners 24/7 in cities that are now too hot to live in. Rebuilding infrastructure that's constantly being destroyed by storms. Pumping water across continents to deal with drought. The energy we took is demanding energy back just to manage the mess it created.
Okay, next one. We consumed fertile soil. We cashed it in for cheap calories and bumper crops.
And now food security is extracted from us. We traded the long-term health of the soil for short-term yield spikes. Now yields are flattening or falling in many parts of the world, crops are failing due to heat and drought, and we are scrambling to maintain food supplies in a world with degrading dirt. The bill is coming due at the grocery store.
We consumed fresh water. We used it like it was infinite.
And now water security is extracted from us. We are seeing this all over the world. It's not a future problem. Regions that built their entire modern economies on cheap, abundant water, like the American West or parts of India, are now facing existential thirst. The water just isn't there anymore.
We consumed coastal land and wetlands. We paved them over for cities and condos and ports.
And now living space is extracted from us. As the seas rise and storms intensify, we are being forced into a managed and sometimes chaotic retreat. The land we thought we conquered is being taken back by the water. Insurance markets are collapsing in these areas. You literally cannot live there financially or soon physically.
And the last one, the abstract one again. We consumed predictability.
And now planning capacity is extracted from us. And this is a huge one for businesses, for governments, for you trying to plan your life. How do you plan a 30-year mortgage or a 50-year infrastructure project when you don't know if the city will be underwater or on fire or out of water in 10 years?
You can't.
You can't. We stole certainty from the future, and now we are living in radical uncertainty. The symmetry is precise.
It really, really reinforces that core thesis. This isn't nature being vengeful. The ocean doesn't hate us. The atmosphere isn't angry.
No, not at all. It is a closed system balancing its accounts, that's all. Extraction from the system is extraction from yourself across time. The doer and the receiver are merging. The circle is closing.
And it really feels like it's closing faster and faster. This isn't a slow motion thing anymore. And the source calls this phase 4, the compression event.
And yes, this is when later becomes now.
I think we are all feeling this in our bones, the pace of change. It used to be that you'd hear about a historic drought or a 100-year flood once in a generation. Now it's every summer. It feels relentless.
That is the absolute hallmark of the compression event. The feedback loops are accelerating. The timeline shift is dramatic. Problems that used to take generations to manifest are now appearing in years. Problems that took years now happen in seasons. The lag time is collapsing.
The source gives some really concrete, real-world examples of this compression.
It does. Let's look at aquifers again. For decades, a farmer in Kansas might notice the water table dropping a few inches a year.
Yeah.
It was a slow, predictable decline. Manageable. You just drill your well a little deeper every decade.
Right, a linear problem.
Exactly. Then suddenly, wells go dry. Not over 10 years, but in one season. The bottom falls out of the system. That's compression. The buffer is gone, so the failure is no longer gradual, it's instant.
Or climate. We went from rare extreme weather, the occasional bad hurricane that would dominate the news for a month, to what the source calls serial disasters.
Exactly. It's the permanence of the emergency state. There is no recovery time between the hits.
Yeah.
You get hit by a flood in the spring, and while you're still mucking out your basement, the wildfire smoke rolls in for the summer. Then the heat wave hits. Then an ice storm. The system, and our society, has no downtime to recover and reset.
And migration, too. It went from a gradual movement of people to these sudden, rapid displacements.
A town burns down in a day, a dam breaks, and a valley is submerged. It's not a slow trickle anymore. It's a sudden wave.
So why is this happening? Why the sudden speed up now?
We have to go back to the bathtub, but we have to understand the math of it. Systems do not degrade linearly. Humans think linearly 1, 2, 3, 4, but nature and complex systems, they work exponentially 1, 2, 4, 8, 16.
Right. It's that famous quote about going bankrupt. It happens slowly, then all at once.
That's it exactly. When the bathtub is 50% full, you have a massive buffer. You can make a lot of mistakes, you can add a lot of input without an immediate disaster. But at 99% full, there is almost no buffer. And at 100% full, there's zero buffer.
And the source argues we are at 99 to 100% capacity in multiple systems at the same time.
Simultaneously, the carbon bathtub, the biodiversity bathtub, the freshwater bathtub, the topsoil bathtub, we've brought them all to the brim at roughly the same time.
So the result is that every additional input, every extra ton of CO2, every last acre paved, every last gallon of fossil water pumped, produces an immediate and often violent output, a spill.
The delay that separated the doer from the receiver has collapsed to near zero. We're now experiencing the consequences of our actions in something approaching real time. We are watching the rock hit the window and feeling the glass hit our face simultaneously.
That's a lot to process. And I think that's actually the next logical step here. How on earth does the human mind deal with this? Because if I sit with that reality for too long, the idea that the buffer is gone and we are in this state of real-time consequence, I start to panic.
It's a completely natural and understandable reaction. Panic is what happens when your reality shifts and you don't have a map for the new territory. And the source dedicates a whole very important section to the psychology of recognition, it asks. How do we react when we finally realize we are both the problem and the victim?
And it outlines 5 stages, which feel very much like the stages of grief, but for an entire civilization.
Very similar structure. The first stage it identifies is denial. This isn't really happening. The science is unsure. It's just a natural cycle. Look, it's cold outside today, so global warming has to be fake.
This is the ego just protecting itself from a painful truth, right?
Yes, the ego absolutely resists culpability. It is too painful, too shattering to admit that our lifestyle, the things we love, the comfort we enjoy, the economy we depend on, is the weapon destroying our future. So we deny the link. We deny the data to protect our self-image.
Okay, but when the evidence becomes too overwhelming, we move to stage 2, bargaining. I feel like we see this constantly in the media and in tech circles.
Oh, constantly. This is the stage of green tech will fix it. We can still have endless growth if we just recycle more. Maybe if we all switch to electric cars, we don't have to change anything else fundamental about our lives.
The mind is just desperately seeking an escape route, a way out that doesn't involve sacrifice.
We are trying to negotiate with physics. We're trying to find a loophole in the laws of thermodynamics. We want to keep all the benefits of being the doer without any of the receiver consequences. We're trying to convince ourselves we can eat the cake and have it too.
But physics doesn't negotiate.
It does not. So when that fails, when the electric car doesn't stop the forest fire, we move to stage 3, which is blame. This is a huge one right now. It's everywhere. It's corporations, it's the politicians, it's that other country, it's the boomers, it's the millennials, it's anyone but me.
We try to separate the doer from the receiver again. We try to put ourselves firmly back in the victim camp and find a villain to point at.
Exactly. It's a way to externalize the guilt and responsibility. If someone else is the villain, then I'm off the hook.
And if that doesn't bring any relief, if the problems keep getting worse, we land in despair.
Nothing matters.
Yep.
It's too late. We're doomed, so why bother?
Mm-hmm.
This is the collapse into helplessness. And honestly, it's just the flip side of the denial coin.
How so?
Both denial and despair lead to the exact same outcome. Inaction. They excuse you from doing anything. If it's not happening, you don't have to act. If it's too late to do anything, you also don't have to act.
That's a really powerful point. Despair feels like a smart, cynical position, like you're the only one brave enough to see the truth. But really, it's just lazy. It's a cop-out.
It is. It's an abdication of responsibility.
Right.
Which brings us to the final stage, the one the source urges us toward, which is acceptance.
I am both contributor and recipient.
This is real.
Yeah.
I am part of this system. I am both the one holding the match and the one whose house is getting burned. This is the integration of reality. It's looking the monster in the face and not flinching.
The text makes a really interesting point that societies and individuals, they just oscillate between those first four stages. We bounce from denial to blame to bargaining to despair, sometimes all in the same day. Very few of us actually reach acceptance and stay there.
And the reason for that, the source argues, is because of the frame we use to understand the problem. It distinguishes between the moral frame and the systemic frame. And this is absolutely critical for anyone listening who wants to stay sane and be effective.
Okay, break that down for us. What is the moral frame?
The moral frame is the one we default to. It says, humanity is evil. We are a plague on the planet. Nature is taking revenge. We have sinned against the earth. It frames this entire crisis as a punishment for our bad behavior.
Which naturally leads to feelings of guilt, shame.
Immense guilt and defensiveness.
Right.
If you call me evil, my first instinct is to defend myself or shut down. It leads to paralysis. It's emotionally charged, but it's not functional. Shame rarely leads to smart engineering or effective adaptation.
So what's the alternative, the systemic frame?
The systemic frame is completely different. It says systems are rebalancing. Consequences are mathematical. We exceeded the regeneration rate of the system, so the system is now forcibly correcting back to a new, lower state. It's depersonalized.
Neutral.
It's totally neutral. Because it's neutral, it allows for clear-headed action. If your car breaks down because you didn't change the oil for 100,000 miles, you don't say, the car is taking revenge on me for my sins.
No, of course not.
You say, mechanically the friction destroyed the engine. I made a mistake in maintenance. I now need to either fix the engine or get a new mode of transport. It's a problem to be solved, not a judgment to be endured.
So the key takeaway here is, the circle is closing regardless of how we feel about it. Guilt is a useless expenditure of energy. Understanding the mechanics is useful.
Precisely. We need mechanics for this problem, not priests.
Okay, so let's get useful. Let's get mechanical. We've talked about the physics, the history, the psychology. Now let's talk about actually living in this closed circle. The source calls this final part adaptive implications.
And the headline here, the single most important concept is the end of externalization.
Externalization. That's an economic term usually, right? Like when a factory dumps sludge in the river, they are externalizing the cost of waste disposal. The community downstream bears the cost. The factory keeps the profit.
Right. And for centuries, our entire global economy and way of life has been built on the fact that an elsewhere existed. There was always a way to throw things. We could dump downstream. We could extract resources from colonies far away. We could borrow prosperity from the future.
But now,
Elsewhere is gone. The circle is closed. You cannot dump downstream anymore because you are downstream. The pollution you put in the ocean ends up in the fish on your plate. The microplastics are now found in our blood and our brains. There is no escape.
you cannot extract from elsewhere because our global supply chains mean that distance provides no real protection. If a historic harvest fails in another continent because of a heat wave, your grocery prices go up tomorrow. If a factory shuts down in Asia due to a flood, you can't get car parts in Ohio.
And you cannot borrow from later because later is now. The time horizons have collapsed. So given this new reality, how do we make decisions?
Yeah.
The source lists 5 critical shifts in thinking.
Okay, number 1, planning horizons.
They have to shorten dramatically. You can't make a 50-year plan that just extrapolates from the past. You have to assume that the consequences of your project will arrive during the implementation of the project itself.
So if you're building a coastal bridge, you better know what the sea level and storm surge will be like in 5 years, not just look at the climate of the last 50.
Exactly. The feedback is now part of the project timeline.
Okay, number two, risk assessment.
This has to transform from buying insurance against external events to changing your behavior to avoid creating the consequences.
What does that mean in practice?
It means you can't just keep building flammable houses in a drying forest and expect an insurance company to bail you out. At some point, the risk becomes uninsurable. True risk management becomes not building there in the first place. The risk doesn't just a financial number anymore, it's a physical reality.
Number three is a huge one for our economy. Success metrics.
We have to shift from maximize growth at all costs to maintain regeneration. That's the new goal.
Because if you grow beyond the system's ability to support you, you crash.
Inevitably. Success in a closed circle is defined by your ability to keep the system functioning, not by how much you can extract from it this quarter. A business that destroys its own supply chain to maximize this quarter's profit is, by definition, a failed business. It just doesn't know it yet.
Number four, collaboration.
This moves from a nice-to-have corporate buzzword to a fundamental biological necessity. In a resource-constrained, closed loop, hoarding is maladaptive. It's a losing strategy.
How so?
If you hoard all the water in a drought-stricken valley, your neighbors' farms fail, the regional economy collapses, the roads aren't maintained, society breaks down, and you end up isolated and vulnerable anyway. Cooperation becomes the only logical survival strategy.
It's the lifeboat theory. If you shoot everyone else in the lifeboat to get more rations, you're just alone in the middle of the ocean with no one to help you row.
Exactly. And finally, number 5, wisdom over cleverness. I really like this distinction.
Yeah, what's the difference there? It sounds subtle.
Cleverness is finding a loophole. Cleverness is exploiting the time delay in the feedback loop. Cleverness is the accounting trick that hides the debt. Wisdom is recognizing the fundamental limit of the system and respecting it.
We've been a very clever species.
We have been incredibly clever monkeys. We figured out how to fly, how to split the atom, how to edit genes. Now we need to become wise organisms.
So on a practical level, for the listener who's, driving to work right now or making dinner, what do they do with all this? Because it can feel so huge and abstract and overwhelming.
On a personal level, it all boils down to one word: resilience. Building personal and community resilience. Build practical skills. Can you repair things? Can you grow some of your own food? Do you know how to purify water?
Basic stuff.
The basics. Reduce your dependence on fragile, long-distance, just-in-time systems. Ask yourself, if the truck doesn't come to the grocery store for a week, are you okay? If the power goes out for a few days, can you manage?
And building psychological tools for uncertainty, that seems just as important.
It's paramount. Learning to pivot. Learning to accept that plans will change, that disruption is the new normal. Cultivating a mindset that isn't brittle.
And on a systems level, if we have leaders or engineers or city planners listening,
We have to redesign everything for regeneration. Every process we build, whether it's a business, a building, a farm, a city, needs to answer one fundamental question. Does this activity replenish the system's buffer? Or does it deplete it further? Does this put water back in the bathtub? Or does it take more out?
it's a total overhaul of the logic of our civilization.
It is, but it's the only logic that works when you're living in a closed circle.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on the outro of the source material. It offers this biological context that I found strangely, comforting, because after all this heavy talk, it helps to zoom out and see the bigger picture.
It's the Petri dish comparison, and it's a really good one.
Yeah. Tell us about the bacteria in the deer.
The source reminds us, humanity isn't evil. We are biological organisms, and we behave like them. If you put bacteria in a Petri dish with a rich nutrient solution, they will expand exponentially. They will consume until they hit the edge of the dish or run out of food, and then their population will crash.
Okay.
If you put deer on an island with no predators, they will eat all the vegetation until there's nothing left, and then they will starve.
So we just did what any organism does when given access to a massive pot of stored energy.
Exactly. We found the fossil fuel cookie jar, the biggest, richest, most concentrated pot of energy ever discovered on this planet, and we eat the cookies. It wasn't born of malice. It was a biological imperative. Expansion, growth, consume the available energy.
But, and this is the big but, this is the whole point.
This is the difference. Bacteria cannot understand that the Petri dish has edges. They have no concept of the system they're in. Deer cannot recognize the concept of carrying capacity until their population crashes. They can't look at the grass and say, hey fellas, maybe we should save some for next year.
But humans can.
We can. We have this unique, rare, and maybe even precious capacity to recognize the circle before it fully closes. We can see the edges of the petri dish. We can use science to model the future. We can understand the feedback loops. We can see the wall coming before we hit it head on.
So we have a choice that the bacteria in the dish don't have.
We do. A profound choice. We can choose to self-regulate. We can choose to adapt before the total collapse forces our hand. We can use that big, clever brain of ours to not just be clever, but to finally be wise.
And that brings us to the final provocation of the piece, the question it leaves us with.
The question isn't, will the circle close? That's a settled question. It is already closing. The water is spilling out of the bathtub as we speak. The real question is, who do we become when we finally truly realize we are both the doer and the receiver?
Do we collapse into blame and despair? Do we just keep shouting at the other who broke the window? Do we hide in the basement and hope it goes away?
Or do we mature into wisdom? Do we accept that we broke the window and now we have to live in a house with a draft, and maybe it's time to figure out how to fix it together?
It's a powerful place to land. Separation was always an illusion. Connection was always the underlying reality. We finally have to face it now.
That is the essence of the systemic frame. We are one system. We rise or we fall together.
Well, that is a lot to chew on, and I really hope you, the listener, take a moment this week to look at your world through that systemic frame. When you see a headline about a flood or a notice about water restrictions or the price of lettuce at the store, try to see the loop closing. Try to see the doer and the receiver as one.
It changes how you see everything.
It really does. Thanks for diving deep with us today. This was fascinating.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll catch you next time.